afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work-study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session, March 28, 2023. The meeting is called to order. We have two council members that have an excused absence. I'll call the remainder roll call. Councilmember Oldama. Here. Councilmember Hugh. Here. Councilmember Milner. Present. Vice Mayor. Here. I'm here, the chairman. With that said, we do have a quorum. Ms. Bauer, can you introduce item number 1 for us?
Department of Housing and Urban Development, Community Planning and Development Grant Investment Recommendations.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide our first staff report today will be led by Jean Marino, our Director of Community Services, and she'll be joined by Matthew Hess, our Revitalization Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So today's presentation, we've actually combined our annual investment recommendations along with the public service grant recommendations. So we're hoping that the presentation material is easy to follow, but I just wanted to point that out that we've combined those two presentations this year. So we will get started and just provide you with just a brief update on some key accomplishments that we've accomplished over the last year, some staff analysis that were the basis of our recommendations moving forward. We want to talk to you about a proposed pilot program, and then the investment recommendations around the public service grants and the other grant dollars that we receive. We will be asking for consensus today, and then we'll talk about next steps.
The first couple of programs that we'd like to provide you with some accomplishments on are the Pandemic Small Business Assistance and also Tenant-Based Rental Assistance. The former is a completed program. Finished up in the fall of 2022, approximately 32 businesses, exactly 32 businesses were assisted, covering 79 jobs that were retained. We spent about $460,000 on that. There is additional funding that's remaining from that we'll be discussing in future slides about how to reallocate. The Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program is ongoing. We do have a subrecipient, New Leaf, which has been running that program for us. To date, they have assisted 46 households with 95 individuals. Just a reminder, that program is for those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It's part of our overall homelessness strategy. And again, there's additional funding that we are recommending to allocate to that program as well.
So next on the accomplishments, our Community Action Program has been successfully administering rapid rehousing and eviction prevention in addition to the Treasury's Emergency Rent Assistance Program. So they've successfully expended about $1.8 million between CDBG and ESG funding and served over 399 households. We are recommending additional allocations, which we'll talk about later for those programs as well. And then we've talked to you recently over the past several months about the Homeless Master Services Agreement and the success that we're seeing in that. Over 1,000 clients have been permanently rehoused, and again, these are formerly homeless families, and we are recommending additional funding based on need and performance for that program as well.
We've also made some significant progress in the physical improvement program. 2 primary projects. One is downtown cafe lighting, which you all recall. Phase 1 was completed last year. Phase 2 is currently almost complete with construction plans, and we expect that to go out to bid in April. The ADA accessibility corner ramp replacements is, again, approximately 95% complete. There will be approximately 140 of those ramps replaced, and we do expect that that funding will be expended sometime in May.
So when staff was looking at the balance of the funding that needs to get invested and reallocated, we obviously look at that as compared to the 5-year consolidated plan and identify the most significant consolidated plan goals. We're still seeing that renters are struggling to find affordable units. That's obviously a factor of the rent increases in the marketplace. Homeowners are continuing to build equity because the home prices have continued to remain stable in the region. We are seeing, more families experiencing homelessness as a result of, losing a unit, being unable to pay rent, et cetera. And then we were specifically looking for sustainability for ongoing programs, and then with a focus on completing the existing physical improvement projects. So you'll see the consolidated plan goals that we're recommending that we focus on this year: affordable housing, homeless services, public services for vulnerable populations, and the neighborhood livability. So on the rental rehab pilot program, I mentioned we're recommending that we take a look at a potential pilot program this year. This would be an activity that can be undertaken under our existing rehabilitation program, which typically has focused on owner-occupied units. This would be a project in collaboration with Building Safety, and what we would be looking at is working with them to identify buildings that have been marked as single-family residential units that have been marked as unsafe to occupy, and then working with that property owner to see if we can encourage and entice the rehabilitation of that property so that it can be put into the inventory for affordable units. So if this program is successful, we would expect this project to complete a couple of different things. One, we're going to be eliminating community blight, and then increasing the availability of affordable rentals in our community. This would be something that we would try out over the next year, see if we can make any progress with homeowners. And the focus really would be ensuring that our existing housing clients or CAP clients would have a first opportunity to rent those units, if at all possible. It would require an agreement with the property owner that they're going to maintain a period of affordability based on the level of investment that we would make in the property. And there would be a lot of details to work out. So this is just, we're trying to seek consensus direction from the council today to move forward with the development of that program, testing it out over the next year to 18 months, seeing if it demonstrates success to determine if it should warrant continued ongoing investment.
Question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I do have questions about this. Have you made an estimate of how many properties you might be able to rehab under this program? I mean, you're asking us to approve something. Do you have any further details for us about this particular program?
Mayor and Vice Mayor Clark, what I can tell you is a lot of it's going to depend upon the condition of the home. Being that they've been marked as unsafe to occupy, it's going to be difficult for us to tell without doing an assessment on some of those properties to determine what the investment would need to be.
Do you know how many have been labeled unsafe?
I want to say the list is about 180.
Okay.
We wouldn't be able to touch all 180 for sure. I can tell you that with our homeowner rehab program, the projects usually are around about $100,000 for the rehabs. So we'd have to really do some more work to develop what the policy looks like, what the requirements would be, et cetera. We didn't want to do all of that work without, understanding whether or not council would be supportive of doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Before we discuss specific recommendations, just to provide you with a list of all the various funds that we will be discussing today. As you can see, we have a little bit over $5 million between new fiscal year 23-24 funding, about $3.4 million there, and then about $1.7 million of prior year funding to reallocate. Just to note that these are exact allocations. In years past, we have often waited for HUD to provide us with the specific allocations after these discussions, but we received them early this year, and these are the final HUD allocations for fiscal year 23-24. So as Ms. Moreno had indicated, we have organized the recommendations by consolidated plan goal, the first of which is affordable housing. You see up top, the residential rehabilitation, which would include both homeowner and rental, should the council provide its consensus, at approximately $1.5 million. Tenant-based rental assistance at about $1.7 million, and then new rental construction to fill in some small gaps in existing projects for a total of $3.3 million.
Question about this. Residential rehabilitation, is that the program that you're contemplating and asking for council approval to pursue, or is this a different program?
Mayor and Vice Mayor, so the 1.5 million that you see there, that would be inclusive of both homeowner rehab, which is an existing program, and new renter rehab. So they fall all under the rehab activity. So we would put those programs together.
Okay, thank you.
For Consolidated Plan Goal number 2, per prior council consensus, we are recommending to allocate our fiscal year 23-24 ESG allocation to the Homeless Master Services Agreement. There's also a new activity to continue CAP rapid rehousing eviction prevention services to the tune of almost $500,000. You can see that's a variety of back year, prior year allocations. We recognize there's a need for continued assistance in this area.
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
question with regard to rapid rehousing and eviction prevention. So we know that eviction prevention or eviction itself is pretty complex, and there's a lot of reasons why people are evicted. But there could be real reasons why the landlord has to evict after their process. But we know that there's a lot of rental properties that are over market rate. What can the city do, working with maybe the county or the state, for someone to start taking a look at what the percentage over market rate some of these rentals are, and that's causing evictions, that's causing unaffordable rental properties. So is there anything we can do to that, or is it as such that the landlord has the power to do that and we just kind of sit back and watch?
Mayor and Councilmember Aldama, so what you're kind of alluding to is rent control, and that's not something that we have in the state of Arizona. So yes, you are correct. If I own a home, I can charge whatever rent I feel I want to charge, regardless of the quality of home, et cetera. So there is no option for rent control. What we do in the Community Action Program is really look at opportunities to engage with the landlord. We also have a landlord engagement program. We're trying to build those relationships with landlords to help ensure that tenants have access to units. But again, that's relationship building and things like that. There's no laws that we can enact for rent control. Obviously, there was some discussions, I think, at the state level. I don't think that any of those discussions went anywhere.
Mayor, thank you. And yeah, I wouldn't want to rent control, if you will. I just thought maybe, because I know there was a discussion, it didn't go anywhere. It's not even going to get back on an agenda anywhere. But if there was anything we can do, and I think the only thing we can do, because a lot of families call and say, hey, my rent is way too high and I've got to leave now because there's another increase. But simply what you said, maybe just some partnering and having discussions with some of those. There are laws, though, so those who are watching, in properties that are deemed affordable housing and that were built with tax credits, there is market rate control and rent rate control, correct?
Mayor and Councilmember Aldama, yes, you are correct. And we actually have a very detailed knowledge-based article on Glendale One where we list out all of the LIHTC projects that are required to provide affordable rents, as well as other resources for homeowners, or I'm sorry, for renters that are looking for units, specifically affordable units.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, why wouldn't it be more important to focus on eviction prevention and rapid rehousing than residential rehabilitation? You've only got little under $500,000 for rapid rehousing and eviction prevention, which keeps people in their homes, as opposed to throwing $1.5 million at rehabbing homes in a new program that's going to take a long time and will eventually work or not work. Why wouldn't you focus more on keeping people in their homes and throw more dollars at that rather than at a pilot program?
Mayor and Vice Mayor Clark, the reason why we're not able to take all of that money and put it into eviction diversion is because that falls into the public services cap. The reason why we're able to allocate this $492,000 to CAP or make that recommendation is because all of those years of programming had the COVID waiver associated with the public services CAP. So that's the only reason why we're able to allocate more towards that. It's technically public services, is because it's the fiscal year 1920, 2021 CDBG, and then the COVID funding. So that's the only reason why we're able to do this. Otherwise, CDBG funding is traditionally intended to be for infrastructure type projects or affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
A similar question. I'm not sure I agree with Councilmember Clark. I believe that the residential rehab program is very beneficial because it's a long-term fix. It's going to go on for many, many years. But a question I had was, do you have a breakdown of what the residential homeowner versus residential renter of that money is? Again, my opinion is the residential homeowner should qualify as a priority, because I know that there was some discussion last year of reducing some of that in at least some of the areas in my district, and that caused me some concern because it's been very beneficial for certain neighborhoods in my district. And so I just wanted to understand what that allocation is.
Mayor and Councilmember Melnar, we did not say, okay, X amount to renter rehab and X amount to homeowner rehab, because we wanted to make sure that there was some flexibility. I suspect, I could be wrong, that as we go out and we engage with the homeowner on a property that's been marked as unsafe to occupy, they may be wanting to reoccupy that home but have fallen on hard times and cannot afford the rehab. In that particular case, we would process that application as a homeowner rehab if they qualified. Obviously, there's still income qualifications and things like that. If they were very specifically had it as an investment home that they were intending to be as a renter occupied unit, then that's where we would work with them to perform the rehab, make sure that we're leaning the property and that they have a requirement to rent it as an affordable unit using fair market rents for a specific period of time. So that's the reason why we left it flexible, is because we're not really sure what we're going to get into as we start engaging with some of these property owners.
Okay, I get that. Thank you. I would still like to have a breakdown of rental versus homeowners that have been helped, say, in the last couple of years or so.
We can follow up with that.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something. I neither agree with both of them or disagree with both of them because they both have points. But we've got a history in this city, and I've been a big part of working with some groups that have gone out, invested money, manpower, labor to help people stay in their homes. It's very, very important. Our problem isn't that one's more important than the other. One, you want to get people under a roof, but other people, you want to keep them under a roof. They're both critically important. Our problem is money shortage. What we need is DC to send us down a money machine, and we could solve these problems pretty quick. But until then, we really have to leave it up to the experts to figure out where that priority is. Somebody being homeless today or a month from now, we're going to take the homeless today, I think.
Okay, so this is goal number 3, our public services for vulnerable populations. As you're aware, we open our grant process every year, accepting applications from organizations to provide public services. You all received a very large binder of the applications and CDAC's scoring recommendations. They are recommending that we fund these 9 agencies, and they were very specific when making these recommendations that they wanted to ensure that there was representation from all of the vulnerable populations. So you can see here that you have seniors, disabled, domestic violence, and veterans all covered, and youth as well. So this is the culmination of CDAC's hard work in reviewing those grant applications, and we're supportive of these recommendations.
Mayor.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor. I said I would publicly comment on this, and that's exactly what I intend to do. Over my 20-plus years here, I've looked at these recommendations for allocations on a yearly basis, and every year I found something that I didn't agree with or that just I felt could have been used more appropriately. And as I said in my email to you over the weekend, lightning has struck. For the first time in all the years I've been on council, and having reviewed the book in thorough detail, and it's one of those big books, by the way, that I agree with every recommendation that's been made by the Community Development Advisory Committee and staff. The matrix is right on for scoring. I think everyone did an excellent job, and I want to commend you for thinking like I did for 1 year out of 20. So thank you for a very good job. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I mean, you finally got it right.
Okay, and then the last recommendation is around neighborhood livability. As you know, we received council consensus direction a while ago to start investing in a fiscal improvement program. These are what we are calling shovel-ready projects that the city can control to ensure that funds get spent in a timely manner. And so we do have some program income and some remaining funding from prior years that we're recommending we put into that fiscal improvement program. As I mentioned, we want to get the ADA curb project closed out, as well as the downtown lighting project closed out before we start any new projects, just to make sure that we have enough funding to fund the completion of those projects. And with that, that concludes the meat of our presentation. We are looking for consensus direction from the council on these recommendations, all of which were included on the summary documents and attachments that you had, as well as those public service grant recommendations.
Questions? No questions? Is there a consensus?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you'll see the dates for next steps. We'll be coming back to council for voting in April, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bauer, item 2, if you would, please.
Presentation regarding the Unified Development Code.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide the staff report will be led today by Tabitha Perry, our planning manager.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. November of last year, a presentation on the draft UDC was presented by myself and the consultant, Matt with Michael Baker International. The discussion covered several key topics where Council requested additional information and provided input on various topics. Today is one of 2 follow-up presentations covering specific topics as discussed at the November City Council workshop. Today, we will be presenting on neighborhood notification requirements, recreational adult use marijuana establishments, good neighbor policy, which is a newly created policy, and planned residential development. At a future second City Council workshop, we will be presenting for a discussion on group homes and authority level. We are seeking Council's input and guidance on the topics presented today. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Matt.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's good to be back before you this afternoon. I think I'll just, with Tabitha's good intro, I'll just go ahead and jump into the discussion topics. As you can see on the slide here, our first topic that we wanted to bring back to you is our neighborhood notification requirements. As a reminder, when we were last before you, we presented this table to emphasize some of the suggested changes to notification distances for specific types of applications. And in this approach, we were in essence utilizing a tiered system where currently we utilize a flat 300-foot notification distance, and this table would apply a tiered approach based on the size of the parcel, and then some variations based off of the different types of applications. So at our last workshop, there was a discussion and a comment made that this approach made sense, but did we or could we give some consideration to the fact of what, regardless of size, if a particular application had some impacts, how can we expand our notification umbrella, if you will? And so we naturally took that direction and went back and first went and looked at some of our benchmark communities to make sure we could recognize where certain other communities within Maricopa County are. And so you can see at the top there that after a very thorough review of most communities actually within Maricopa County, notification ranges based on applications do fall within that 300-foot to 900-foot, with the greatest distance being that quarter mile or 1320. And that's actually applied in our neighbor here in the city of Peoria. So within that context, understanding that at least our notification boundaries are in keeping with other benchmark communities, we wanted to think broadly about how then can we apply some additional suggestions to improve notification conditions. And so one of those, rather than just start throwing out different distances, we thought maybe we could take a more practical approach. And so that first note that you see there in terms of recommendations is the potential of considering a concept that would, due to the potential impact of a project that may exceed beyond the required minimum notification boundary, required notification distances shall be increased by 30% if at least one of the following conditions exist. And you can see that it would be a zoning or land use request would result in conversion of a single-family residence designation to a multifamily residence designation or non-residential designation, and vice versa. And so that key there is that we're emphasizing the single-family residential aspect. And so that would be one trigger point. Another would be a zoning or land use request may result in the need to change an existing roadway classification, revise an existing roadway alignment, or warrant the installation of a traffic signal. So those are some of the conditions as we looked at the particular situations that most often trigger a desire for community input. So we tried to craft this to address those specific conditions, and that is when you see a change in zoning or some impacts to our circulation system. Now, with that though, we also had comments from council about it's not always relative to distance, and so how can we think more broadly about also expanding some of the other tools that we use to hopefully improve residents' ability to be aware of specific applications. So the next bullet point, and again, this would be almost a comprehensive, it's not a selection of these, it would be all of these that we're suggesting, is require larger sites, 40 acres or above, with street frontage to install sign along each street frontage so as to ensure at least one posting for each quarter mile. For applicable sites with no street frontage, postings shall be installed on the property in locations clearly visible to abutting residents so as to ensure at least one posting for each quarter mile. So the key here is right now the current code only requires one sign. And so if when we see larger parcels, we naturally also look at the desire to ensure that if people have a consistent travel path, that if a proposed site has multiple frontages, that we have signage on those frontages. The other one I think is interesting, and one that was utilized in some benchmark or a benchmark community, but we thought that while we're addressing notification at the application stage, what about addressing notifications at the preliminary stage in terms of at the neighborhood meeting level? As you all know, that we do require applicants to, for specific requests, to have a neighborhood meeting. And so in this situation, the thought is to enhance notification of neighborhood meetings beyond just a mailer would be at this preliminary stage of the application process. Applicants shall install a sign on the property in locations clearly visible to abutting residents so as to ensure at least one posting for each quarter mile. All signs shall set forth the purpose, time, date, and place of the neighborhood meeting. So again, that focus is to hopefully try to expand that notification earlier in the process to identify issues and not have them be, carry forward through the process when you get to the actual public hearing. The final bullet point there is just in terms of, there was comments made also about the CUP process, and do we want to expand, because currently, as you can see on the chart, the conditional use permit has a 300-foot notification currently, and we kept that 300-foot notification. And so at the last council workshop, it was asked, can we go look at CUPs? And so staff went ahead and looked back through the last number of years of specifically drive-through CUP requests. And out of all of those, there were approximately 9 that were reviewed, and only one of those out of all those notifications had a comment that came back.
Hey, hold up just a second, go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I think all of your suggestions are good, and I would adopt all of them. I do get perturbed when I hear that we're in keeping with other communities. I'm not interested in keeping up with other communities. I'm interested in developing what works for Glendale, whether it's like similar communities or not. And the one complaint that I hear repeatedly and often is when the notification goes out, part of a neighborhood gets it, and then if it's beyond that number of feet, the rest of the neighborhood has no idea. I don't know why we can't adopt something that says adjacent neighborhoods should be notified in toto, rather than just part of a neighborhood in keeping with an X amount of feet distance. Now, some people are going to say, well, that's going to put an onerous financial burden on the developer. But let's face it, the developer is paying millions of dollars for the land, will invest millions more in development of whatever product goes on the land. To ask them to pay several $100s more in notification fees does not seem out of or unusual or strange. So I still would like you to incorporate everything you've got here, but add some verbiage that compact adjacent neighborhoods should be notified, not just part of a neighborhood. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Phelps?
Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Clark, I think we can certainly go back and look at some options, but I can give you some examples of what you just stated I think would be untenable for some. So for example, let's say we're doing which we could see soon, a zoning application at the corner of Cardinals Way and 91st. The adjacent neighborhood is Stonehaven. That would mean the notification for that particular project could be as much of including over 1,400 homes that are currently residing within Stonehaven. So we can think through maybe some ways to accomplish what you want to do, and it may be, for example, that if neighborhoods have homeowners association, there's a formal process to notify HOAs and ask them to broaden it out. But I would just be careful. Not all neighborhoods are compact, and some are actually quite large, and we just want to think through all of those scenarios and make sure we don't miss something there.
I would simply say that Stonehaven is an aberration with its 1,300 homes. The next largest subdivision I can think of in the area is Rovey with 800, which is again in the same classification of Stonehaven. But most of the neighborhoods only comprise 300 homes, 400 homes. And maybe it has to be in terms of, I'm no genius, and I don't know what the exact answer is, but when they are smaller subdivisions, I would think it would be appropriate to notify the entire subdivision. Thank
Mayor?
you.
Yeah, hold on, Mr. Melner?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree in part with Councilmember Clark. However, I think the answer has been resolved in your requirement for posting the signs along the road every quarter miles about the project. The biggest concern that citizens have given to me is they didn't know about the meeting. But with that posting, I believe that takes care of that situation. A large sign posted along the side, people are always looking, people are always sending me a request. What's going on in this corner or that corner? Well, they're going to be looking for the signs, and if the sign says there's going to be a neighborhood meeting on this date, on this project, I believe that is sufficient notification, and I think the footage requirements should have been increased from where they were, which I agreed with. But what really convinced me that we're doing sufficient is putting that sign on the street about the meeting. That, I think, is critical, and that will answer the concern, I think, questions that Councilmember Clark was having.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's worthy of a conversation and further diligence. Vice Mayor has a good point, as does the councilman. Let's take Stonehaven, and that's the note I made before the city manager mentioned it. Let's take Councilmember Malnar's comments. The additional signs are good, but Stonehaven is so large. If I live on the Camelback or the southern part of that, I'll never see the sign. If it's not there, then I never see the sign. I don't know about it. So the additional signs is good, but it could be placed as such that some families don't get it, okay? So let's go back to the worthy conversation on the notification. Let's just take anywhere part of the city and there's a community that's HOA and people pay the HOA fee, and I'm on outside of the 300 foot or whatever the max is, but Vice Mayor is within, she gets the notification, all the information. I don't. It still affects me because I live in that division, but I'm outside of it. So now, Stonehaven is quite large, but as the Vice Mayor suggested, there are others that are smaller. So let's just take Independence Heights in my district. If 300 feet was smack dab in the middle of it, you can still live in Independence Heights and not have any information on that, but it affects you because you live in Independence Heights. So I think it's worthy of the conversation. I really, really do. I'm not sure what the solution is, but the Vice Mayor has an absolute good point. Again, what I just laid out, you could live in Independence Heights and have no say. You can still come to the public meetings, but it means a lot and it's valued a lot when you get that card and all the information you have, where you can go and who you can call. And so I think it's worthy of the conversation. And the councilman is right, the additional signs will help, but if you live on a side that is not being posted on, you never see it. Just something to think about, and I'd like to see if we can come back with a conversation on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no problem with signs. Signs are great. But have you ever tried to read a notification sign, when you're traveling 30 or 40 miles an hour with traffic? I defy you to read that sign. And in fact, in some instances, what I've had to do is turn around, go back, park, get out of the car, to read the darn sign. So signs are great, but they don't really do the job that we need to do if we're going to seriously notify adjacent residents of what's going on in their neighborhood. So I'm not saying get rid of the signs, keep the signs, use every tool in our toolbox. But I definitely think we have to address how we notify whole neighborhoods that can be affected by a new project adjacent to them. Thank you.
I just follow up to that. I think a good compromise is what our city manager suggested. Most neighborhoods nowadays have HOAs, or if not, they have block watch groups and things like that. Perhaps including that the nearby neighborhoods will be notified to their HOA or to their neighborhood block watch group. That gets word out pretty quick. I know the HOAs in my district are pretty active, and they get the messages out when something is important. So I think that would be a good compromise, possibly.
Mayor, members of the council, so again, as a follow-up, I think there's a lot of things. Again, the consultant has increased almost every one of these substantially. Now, the challenge is, so let's just say we went from, in one case, we've gone up to from 300 feet to 900 feet. So that's a tripling of the notification. Now it touches a neighborhood at 890 feet out. You now touched a neighborhood that now goes for another 2,000 feet. So, it can really get away. And again, remember one thing, normally here in the city, our challenge has been infill development, because we don't really have a lot of large open space for example, for residential. So I just want to caution, we'll have some more discussion. We'll come back with some additional recommendations. But again, we also don't want to get into a position to where some of our more difficult infill sites aren't redeveloped, because I know the council has kind of prioritized that vacant lots that have been vacant for a long time are detrimental to really building healthy communities. And so we'll ask the consultant and the team to come back and look at that and try to put some framework around there. And then maybe at the end of the day, as I'm processing this, is there a way the city can create databases that help make notification a little bit less expensive for the developer? Maybe there's a way we can look at the notification part of it where it really lowers down the cost, either through email notification or some other sorts of lower cost notification, and we can provide that as an incentive for redeveloping or developing inside the city limits of Glendale. There may be some options there, but we'll look at that. But we certainly will come back with some other recommendations.
I would say two things. You know, like how we have Amber Alert, and also they have notifications now when there's a problem in your community. There may be a program out there that can be adopted, or that is already in use, where you can target certain areas of your community to send out an electronic notification. I'd like us to look at that and see, and if there is one, to maybe require developers to use that electronic notification program if there is one out there. Secondly, my last comment would be, when it comes to development, I'm going to push back on the side of residents and their ability to know as much about what's going on in their neighborhood as possible. The developers can weather the cost. I want the neighbors to know what's going on, and they deserve to know. Thank you.
Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. The Vice Mayor just took my comments, but I want to clarify, because the city manager inadvertently, it wasn't on purpose, just you mentioned something about, not your words, but burdening developers. I want to be clear. I do not want to burden developers who want to develop in Glendale. Absolutely not. There's enough regulations within the city that they have to follow, and I think I feel our team has done a really good job. Our commission has done a really good job on previous developments. So I want to be clear, I'm not here to hinder them, but as the Vice Mayor stated, I weigh heavily on the residents and the citizens and their ability to be notified than I do on the developer side. And yes, there is a cost, and the city manager mentioned it. There's probably a way we can discuss that can reduce that cost. When I was on the commission, we added a labeling to it, which helps. And unfortunately, that is a cost, but it helps. It identifies the mail when it comes to you as not junk mail. But certainly, over-communicating to our citizens on a project that affects you and your property value, absolutely no problem with that. But it sounds like you're going to go around with your team and see what you can bring back to us. I just wanted to be clear, I'm not trying to hinder any developer from coming here. Thank you.
Mr. Phelps, I have one question for you, and then I guess we can move on. What's policy right now for the city when a developer comes in? They typically have a mailing, an actual snail mail that they have to send out. Do we have a policy, or has there ever been a policy that the city can assist in electronic to those same people? Or it may not be a burden for them, but at the same time, the citizens are also notified.
I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask that. Perhaps we can get back to you on that, or unless Tabitha, you know?
Mayor, Council, we'll need to research that and get back with you on that as well.
And my only point is if we don't have that, that might be a solution to both, where we can get that notification out easier and it not be a burden on the developers, and more importantly, our citizens or taxpayers know what's going on. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, Council, all very thoughtful feedback. We will move to the next topic, recreational marijuana. Recreational adult use, or as referred to at the state level, marijuana establishments. As a reminder, actually there on the bottom of the screen, last time we were before you at the previous workshop, obviously the city has existing regulations relative to controlling medical marijuana regulation, or facilities, I should say. And you can see those regulations on the left-hand side of the slide. When we were taking this conversation at the workshop, the issue was addressing now recreational marijuana establishments, and the consideration that now that those facilities are legal, there are two approaches before us. It is one, to only allow operation of dual licensees who operate both a nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary and a marijuana establishment. So the first consideration was only restricting the existing medical marijuana facilities or establishments in the city to be allowed to dispense recreational marijuana. At that time, the alternative would be to allow both standalone. So if a facility just has a license to sell recreational marijuana, they could locate in Glendale, or if they only have a license for medical marijuana, they can obviously already locate in Glendale. So at the last workshop, it was, I think, generally recommended that council was comfortable with allowing the standalone medical marijuana and marijuana establishments, but that you wanted just some additional clarification to ensure that that was not or did not create an unfavorable condition within or across the city. And so this slide is just used to give some additional background in terms of how those licenses are provided, and an analysis, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, of the city overall, the green areas identifying where existing medical marijuana facilities or grow facilities are located, and the pink or orange tone areas identify generally, if we were to allow standalone, as it was suggested, what that would potentially allow for future locations. Now, again, that's still dependent on, a point in time, depending on where other facilities are located at the time of application and where specifically the applicant's location is. But overall, that map identifies what the total impact might be. But the key disclaimer there in terms of looking at the licensing regulations, that licenses for medical marijuana and recreational marijuana facilities are based off of the number of open pharmacies in the state, and they provide licenses at 1 per 10 pharmacies for both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana facilities. And then they also grant 26 social equity licenses. So within that context, we have spacing requirements, we have land use requirements, and there's also a limitation on just the physical number of licenses in the state. So there seems to be in alignment with council's comments at the last workshop that standalone medical marijuana and a marijuana establishment could be accepted within Glendale. Making sure that we continue to preserve those existing regulations relative to location, distances, and the need for a license. So with that, I would turn it over to you, Mayor, to see if there was any follow-up questions or clarifications.
Mr. Melner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. Under the medical marijuana, it says that there are 131 active, and basically 134 would be available, 10%. What would be available under the medical marijuana establishments without the medical? How many are available? It says 169 are approved, but how many can it have total?
So they are provided at a point in time. So right now there's 1,347 pharmacies in 2023. If you do the math, it doesn't necessarily, those pharmacies at 1 per 10 don't totally align with the 131 or 169 because the number of pharmacies at that point in time when a license was provided changes across the state. But at this point in time, the 131 active is what we were provided from Arizona Department of Health Services for medical marijuana dispensaries, and the 169 approved adult use marijuana establishments. So with those approvals, so Arizona Department of Health Services will provide that license, but then the licensee has to still secure the location within a community. So they have to go through the proper zoning and spacing requirements.
Okay, thank you. And that's kind of the point I was getting to, if I may, Mayor. The question is, we have basically the ability, based on your map, of maybe 5 additional medical marijuana, or not medical, but marijuana or medical marijuana facilities within our city. So my question is, what's the likelihood that those could be filled in? These statistics don't give me any information that tells me, well, yeah, there's 169 approved, but how many of them are active? I'd want to know that. Because if we agree on this, it's going to send a very strong message to marijuana dispensary folks that we have 5 sites available in Glendale, basically, or 5 within the boundaries. And I don't know if this council wants to send that message, but I would really like to know how many could be are available statewide that could still be built based on the 169 approved. And on that 169 that are approved, are there going to be more? Is there a calculation, a formula that states how many the state can approve? I know you mentioned based on pharmacies for medical marijuana, but what's the formula for non-medical marijuana dispensaries?
We will go back and find that specific information for you, Councilmember Melnar. But as far as if I understood your question, the generation rate for recreational marijuana establishments is the same. They use the same parameter, one for 10 pharmacies.
Oh, okay. And then, if I may, Mayor, based on that, they're already over their quota, 169 versus 134.
So a good calculation, and we were looking at that same discrepancy, and it's the function of the fact that the rule has been in place for a few years now, and so the number of licenses that are provided originally were set on the number of pharmacies at that time. And so the number of pharmacies at this time is different. So they don't necessarily take licenses away once they provide them.
Okay, if I may, Mayor, so basically what you're telling me is the state estimated there were about 1,700 pharmacies, and now there are only 1,350 pharmacies.
That's our best understanding at the discrepancy.
I'd like that clarified from the state, that is indeed the case, so that we can have a better information on how we want to proceed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I am not an advocate of marijuana use and never will be. And based upon that philosophy, excuse me, I would prefer option 1 to allow operation of a dual licensee who operates both a nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary and marijuana establishment cooperatively. I think that provides an extra layer of protection in terms of allowing medical marijuana facilities as opposed to just allowing standalone medical marijuana establishments. So I support option 1. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I haven't scrolled down to the end. Are you looking for consensus today, or is this coming back to us?
I think based off of, in any one of these specific topic areas, we'll move forward if we get consensus. If we do not get consensus, we'll come back with further information at a later date.
So you'll accept consensus on any one of these, not the entire thing solely?
Yeah, individually, correct.
Mayor, I just don't feel that this item is ready to have consensus today, so if we're going to move on, I'd like to see it come back, because I'd like to study it a little more, and I think there might even be some more questions that are out there.
Any thoughts?
I would agree with that sentiment as well, that I think we need a little bit more information.
Yeah, we do not have a consensus to move forward today. I think people want to bring it back, more discussion.
We will find out some further information per the direction and bring this back at a future workshop. Any other comments before I move ahead? Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. The next topic, we wanted to go over the Good Neighbor Policy. So as Tabitha mentioned, this is in essence a new policy. When we were bringing this topic up at the last workshop, the Good Neighbor Policy was being presented within the context of wireless communication facilities applied on city-owned properties. After that discussion, the comment was made about why don't we apply a Good Neighbor Policy to city-owned property citywide. So in looking at that specific request, we went back through the UDC and identified that a approach we could implement to address that specific comment is to apply a universal Good Neighbor Policy to all city-owned property with placing a footnote in the specifically Table 6.2, which is the table that identifies the decision-making authority for specific applications. And so within that table, it would make a footnote that states any proposed public or private use or improvement on city-owned property, exclusive, of course, of right-of-ways or public utility easements that is located within 300 feet of the boundary of an existing residential development shall be subject to the administrative review process pursuant to Section 35.6.211 of the UDC, unless otherwise stated herein. And for context, we identify the administrative review process. Now, I will say that as a reminder, in terms of the wireless communication good neighbor policy, it was discussed at that workshop that council generally favored a conditional use permit process for those wireless facilities. But when we started to look at a citywide good neighbor policy where we're uncertain about the specific application that would, or use that would be on the property, we at least introduced the administrative review process. If council wanted to obviously make a change and be more consistent with how the good neighbor policy is applied to wireless facilities, a conditional use permit could be a consideration in place of the administrative review process. With that, I would turn it over to you, Mayor and Council, if there's any questions or feedback.
Questions? Questions? No questions? Okay. So we have a consensus. If you want a consensus, Melner?
On this part, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Moving on to the next topic, planned residential development, PRD. So I think we all, again, another topic that we discussed at our previous workshop where we went through the differences between the planned area development, PAD, and the planned residential development, PRD, processes. At that time, we had proposed making a shift to the PRD process and have that be an administrative review with certain limitations, while the PAD process would still be a council-approved application. Through conversations at that last workshop, it was, I think we collected consensus from council that it was preferred to keep the PRD process as a public hearing and formal planning commission and council final action. And so this slide is simply to confirm that we would be moving forward with that specific change to keep the PRD process as a formal council approval. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't even understand the purpose of this, and I'll tell you why.
Microphone.
Thank you. I don't understand the purpose of this one, and I'll tell you why. You're saying that if it's in SR 17, 45, 30, whatever it is, or an R1, you can't change the density using PRD. Is that correct? Is that what I'm reading? Allows select modifications to development standards except density. So you can't change the density, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to build a house on an SR 17 lot, which is 17,000 square feet. How would modifying the setbacks make any difference, since I can only put one house on that SR 17? Explain to me the benefit of allowing modifications on setbacks on a large lot property.
The PRD process currently within the city code is I would say a PAD light, if you will, in terms of a PAD, obviously we can create a whole set of standards for the development. Whereas the PRD is intended to recognize that some developers, home builders, will come forward with a particular product that may not have been contemplated at the time of drafting the code. And in those instances where we might see that the home builder says, you know, we have this unique product, it doesn't necessarily fit within your setback requirements the way we're proposing it, but it doesn't change the overall density and obviously would maintain other requirements, whether it be design or parking or landscaping, all those other things would still be applicable, but the PRD just gives some minor flexibility to accommodate situations that may not be completely understood at this static point in time. So it's just a way that an applicant doesn't have to go the whole PAD route if all they're trying to do is just make subtle adjustments to a setback and not to a whole character of an area and et cetera.
I just don't like this one. I don't think it's needed. I think it opens the door for other issues down the road. And so I can't support a PRD for large lot development. I just don't like it.
Mr. Melner.
Thank you, Mayor. As we probably all are aware, there's legislation that is being considered down the state regarding this topic. And the question I have is really, I want to understand, I want the public to understand what a development standard is, all the things that are under a development standard versus other types of like zoning changes. The bill currently under discussion at the legislature removes the authority of the city to have any input on development standards at a public setting. It only allows administratively to do that and dictates a very short time frame in which the city must administratively approve those design standards. What I have a question on, because the things that were mentioned to me as a design standard was where a mailbox goes, or the color of the house, or whether it's brick or stucco. And I'm a little confused because I thought design standards were a lot more than that. That they had to do with building design and interior. And I want to get a clarification if we're talking, and when we're saying developmental standards, are we talking just the design standards such as those things I mentioned, or is this much more broad than that?
So I can read out of, Councilmember Malnar, I can read out of the proposed language for PRD. For clarity, the current zoning code has a PRD designation. We were tasked with trying to refine or improve that PRD. So we're not trying to introduce a new tool, if you will, here. We're trying to revise, refreshing the current application. So within that context, the development standards section of the PRD portion of the code, first, A, discusses density and clarifies that density cannot change, as we discussed. It discusses lot size. The average lot area per dwelling, exclusive of the area occupied by streets, shall not be less than that required by the underlying zoning district regulation otherwise applicable to the site. So beyond lot size, we also look at lot width. In no case shall the minimum lot width of the underlying zoning district be reduced by more than 5 feet. And then it goes on with some other parameters. And then it also looks at setbacks. The required setbacks of the underlying zoning district may be amended by a maximum of 5 feet with some limitations. I'm just trying to give the overall context. Lot coverage, in no case shall the maximum lot coverage exceed the underlying zoning district by more than 5%. Height, in no case shall the maximum height of the underlying zoning district be increased, except the maximum height may be increased by 1 foot for every 1 foot of increased setback, up to a maximum of 10. And then finally, open space. Required active open space shall be a minimum of 5% more than the applicable common area requirements set forth within the development standards. So I think, Councilmember Malnar, to answer your question, we tried to specifically, within the PRD, be more detailed about what you would be allowed to adjust and what you're not, and also put, as I will always say, bumpers on that so that it's not continuous, that there are limitations. And all of that is also, as you know, tied to that density application, because that density does drive the character and making sure that that stays consistent with the surrounding communities. So I think to your comments that, you know, the PRD tool can be a tool that helps with the housing issues that we face in terms of giving some added flexibility, but trying to preserve the overall intent of the zoning code. But yes, there are some considerations in terms of whether council feels that this tool is applicable or beneficial to the community overall.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I don't have any further questions, and I don't see any problems moving this forward this time.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Mayor, Council, just for clarification on our end, what we're proposing before you today is to proceed with the PRD as it's written in the zoning ordinance today, where it would have to come back before a planning commission and city council for approval for a PRD overlay, with the exception that currently it will only allow it for single-family residential, and we're proposing to also include multifamily. Currently today, administratively, we have the ability to allow for a 10% relief on setbacks development standards. When they're looking for something more greater than a 10%, we have utilized the tool of the PRD overlay to allow Planning Commission to give the recommendation council the final vote on whether or not to allow for the deviations on development standards. So from the November's meeting, our understanding was that council did not want this to be an administrative process. So today we were trying to get clarity that would council be supportive of at least amending the PRD to allow for a multifamily as well as part of a PRD overlay.
And then that would be followed by the board's vote to recommend, with the decision still lies upon the council.
Mayor, that is correct.
Okay, so is there a consensus for that?
Not with me, no.
Yes.
There is a consensus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. With that, I will turn it back over to Tabitha, and she'll just provide some closing comments.
Mayor, Council, as stated in the introduction, it is our intention to come back before you in April to discuss the group homes in the authority level. In addition to, if we have the ability to prepare to bring back these topics that you has requested additional information on, we'll bring it back to you in April. If not, we will work towards bringing it back to you in the month of May. As you know, the UDC has been in production since 2019, so we are aggressively trying to bring this back before council for a vote in the month of September of this year. We do want to get it right, so although we're trying to aggressively get it before you, we want to make sure that we address all your concerns and receive all your input on the items. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bauer, item 3.
Reporting on opioid settlement funds.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide this next staff presentation is Lee Smith. She's our Maricopa County specialist that's working here for the current year. Thanks.
You have to turn your microphone on. The red button at the base.
Right there, yep.
Are we on?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. So today I am here to discuss reporting on our opioid settlement funds. So to give a brief overview of the agenda that we're looking at for today, I'm going to be providing a brief recap of the distributor settlement, which we've previously discussed in a January workshop, as well as examining the community impact of opioids, both at a regional and a local level, looking at financials and reporting requirements associated with these funds, and looking at the next steps. So to recap the distributor settlement, the City of Glendale received an initial disbursement of approximately $124,000 from the distributor settlement. The distributor settlement is from McKesson Corporation, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen. And so at the previous council meeting, it was determined that the amount received may be inadequate to create self-sufficient programming within the City of Glendale. However, at the time, we were not aware of what the reporting requirements associated with these funds would be, nor did we know what the future disbursement amounts were either. And so the topic was tabled until more information was available, which brings us to why we are here today. So Maricopa County is preparing to report on their settlement funds this year for June. In June 2023 for the previous year, for that first year of disbursements. And so the county must know if Glendale will be reporting on the funds ourselves or if we need to send that money back and have county report on it for us. Circumstances have also slightly changed since the last time that we have met. Glendale, we have received a second settlement disbursement from Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and we have received a projection of Glendale's funds for the next 16 years and a draft of those reporting requirements as well. And so today I'm going to be seeking consensus on whether we will retain these funds and report or give them up and have county report on them. However, if you feel that by the end of this presentation that this is enough information to make a decision regarding whether we retain the settlement as a whole, then that would be welcomed as well. And to also briefly review, these are the 9 eligible spending domains that this money can be used for. So just to briefly touch on each of these: broadening access to naloxone, expanding harm reduction programs, enriching prevention strategies, increasing warm handoff programs and recovery services, provide treatment during pregnancy and postpartum, expand services for neonatal withdrawal syndrome, increase the use of medications to treat opioid use disorder, improve treatment in jails and prisons, and support data collection and research. Further looking at the community impact of opioids, to put this money into perspective, looking at the regional trends in substance use, these numbers are all relevant to Maricopa County as a whole, not the City of Glendale. So you'll see that there's been a steep increase in the fatal overdose death rates, especially those related to synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl, which have increased by over 6,000% since 2012. 94% of these overdoses were accidental, and 80% of these overdoses involved more than one substance. And over 2/3 of these overdoses involved opioids.
Now let me ask you a question. Are those national statistics, or is that for the valley?
Mayor, that is for Maricopa County.
Okay.
And so, furthermore, Glendale, the City of Glendale makes up only 5.5% of Maricopa County's total population. However, Glendale residents account for 8.2% of all overdoses. So we are being overrepresented in these numbers. Further examining fatal overdoses in the City of Glendale, between the years 2019 to 2021, 366 Glendale residents died of a fatal overdose. and zip code 85301 particularly is overrepresented in our fatal overdose data, making up 44% of deaths. And I'll turn your attention as well to the pie chart on your right, which details all of the numbers of opioid deaths per zip code. I apologize for there not being numbers on there. And these Glendale zip codes had the highest rate per capita or per 100,000 of fatal overdoses, which are 85301, 85302, and 85306. So with this, check in mind, looking at the financials and reporting requirements for this money, we see here that these are the annual estimated disbursements for the Distributor Settlement Fund, as well as the Janssen settlement for the next 16 years, going from 2021 to 2038. I apologize for the typo there. We did not go back in time at that last year. You will also notice that within this chart that the Janssen settlement has a shorter duration than the distributor settlement. This is expected. The distributor settlement is the longest one that we know of, with the longest amount of payouts over the course of 18 years. The Janssen settlement is a little bit shorter in its duration. However, it does round out the amount of settlement funds that we receive, in that initially with just the distributor settlement, we would receive $3.3 million, but with the Janssen, that increases our total to about $4 million. Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, back up a page.
Sure.
The pie chart, you show 301 is the highest number of overdoses. It shows 302 is the second highest.
Yes,
and the pie chart represents that. But it says 306, I believe you said, is the third highest, yet you're showing 303 in the green as the third highest, which is correct.
Yes, so they are both technically correct. So what is demonstrated in the pie chart is just the raw numbers. So 85301, let me see, had 140 overdose deaths, and 85302 had 46, and then 85303 was 36. However, with the highest rate per capita, 85301, 302, and 306, they have the highest rate of death. So 85301 has 77.3 deaths per 100,000. And then 85302 has 37.3 deaths per 100,000, and so forth. And so it's like a differentiation between just numbers and rates, if that makes sense.
Let's just make it confusing, that's fine.
Sure, I apologize for that.
No, but it doesn't make sense when you look at it. It does when you're saying it, but when you look at this, you're going still backwards. But that's fine. Okay. I'm just trying to understand why that was different.
Yes, I apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so then looking back at these financials, as I mentioned, with the addition of the Janssen settlement, it brings us from $3.3 million over the course of 18 years to $4 million. And it is also worth noting that this is not the only additional settlement that Glendale would be receiving. We will be receiving more down the line. However, I don't know the exact time of when those funds are going to be coming through. However, it will be happening sooner rather than later. Looking at the reporting requirements by source of settlement funds. So in the One Arizona Agreement, these reporting requirements we know are set in stone for sure, how we need to be reporting. So through that One Arizona Agreement, we must maintain records of our expenditures for a period of at least 5 years and provide an annual report to the state detailing the amount of funds we received, the allocation of any awards that we approved, and the amount dispersed for those awards. The Attorney General's draft of the reporting requirements is a lot more detailed. And so as you can see here, there's a lot of bullet points and sub-bullet points that go into that. So instead, I'm going to direct your attention to the visual representation of the Attorney General's reporting requirements. I'd also like to highlight as well that this is a draft and this may be subject to change, but this is what we have available to us at this moment in time. So starting over here at your left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that you will have to report on what funding source those monies are coming from. So in this first line, that would be the distributor settlement. And then you'd have to distinguish what region you're coming from, what government you are, and what's the name of the organization that received those allocations. And then further, how much those allocations were worth, what was the name of the program, and which abatement category, abatement strategy that program fell into. And there's also accommodation further. If that program qualifies for multiple abatement strategies, then that is also accommodated for in this spreadsheet. And then lastly, you'll see towards your right-hand side of the screen or your papers that you'll have to report on the disbursement frequency and the total dispersed amount. And so for the purposes of the City of Glendale, since we have not spent any of our funds, we would simply be reporting $0 expenditure per each settlement. So $0 for the distributor and $0 for Janssen.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Allow me to thank those from the county who are here today. I appreciate you being here. I was pretty adamant when you came the first time that we don't have time to be sitting on money. Now we've got a second allocation that we're sitting on, and I am not implying that any member of the council wanted to sit on money. We wanted to get the accurate information, and you brought that. The data that you provided is disturbing. It is. And I want those who are watching to understand that even though 94% of the overdoses were accidental, that just tells me the fentanyl and opioids are out there at a significant rate. So it's even scarier when someone accidentally overdoses on opioid than one that does purposely, because you could just be this innocent bystander, didn't know what you're picking up. So it's out there and it's plaguing our communities. So this is just another glance at what our police around the state, but specifically the Glendale Police Department, has to go through, and is what they're dealing with. They could be those who are accidentally overdosed by touching this stuff. I still believe for the reasons of the and you know, I'm not the expert here, but it seems like it's a simplified process to complete the reporting. Our staff did say initially that they didn't think we needed an FTE or additional bodies. It is more work, I get it. But because of the data, it's so significant, I'm still adamant that those dollars should remain with Glendale. We should control the destiny of where it's going based on the data that backs the reason for that. 853, 01, 02, and 06, and 03, there's significant plague in this community. We should have the opportunity to say where that goes and how quickly those funds go. Now, that is not to imply that if the county had it, and that's what the council chooses to do, that they're going to sit on the money and we're going to have to wait. There is a delay. And I trust that they would understand that the data is showing how quick we need to be and take action. All of this is in Glendale. It needs to be, I'm looking at you, but I'm speaking to everybody in our council. We really need to have these funds in our hands, controlled by us, and I know that our staff and our city manager can work to do the reporting. Some of the reporting is already done for us. For example, who's giving it to us, we already know. We know how much we're getting it. What we don't know right now is who we will be giving that to. And I believe I understand that nonprofits can accept those dollars as long as they're within the 9 categories. So there's a lot of nonprofits we work with already that have their hands in prevention but need assistance, and they can turn out more aid. So I'm asking the council to consider keeping those funds in Glendale's control. And that's where I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Aldama. I think based on the dollar value and the ability of our staff to be able to complete these reports, that we could really benefit within our own city with these funds. The question I have is, is, can we use these funds, for example, within our own fire department or police department to provide Narcan, a broader base of Narcan? And again, maybe we already have sufficient in our current budgets, I don't know. But is this something that we would be able to perhaps do a little more training and do those kinds of things in order to help facilitate as the problem has been readily identified?
Mayor, Councilmember Melnar, that would be an approved use of the funds. And something else that I would like to bring up as well concerning the funds is that if we were to give back the entirety of our settlement funds, county has told me that there would be no guarantee of whether or not that money would be spent dollar for dollar in the city of Glendale or even in the region. So that may mean that they spend more, but that may also mean that they spend less in the region. So keeping the funds here would also guarantee the amount that we have to invest directly into our community.
Yeah, let me ask a question based upon your answer just now, but that doesn't mean that if we kept it, that the county wouldn't do also additional things in our city.
Mayor, yes, the county would still continue to do whatever work that they were initially planning on doing.
All right. My question for Mr. Phelps is, do we have any idea what we think it would cost us to try to maintain and report and do all that? I mean, are we spending more than we're keeping? Is there a rough idea?
I'm going to have Deputy City Manager Rick St. John.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of the council, we don't believe the reporting requirement's going to be overly burdensome. We think that it's a fairly simple task annually, take maybe half hour, 45 minutes of time to complete, so we wouldn't be expending anywhere near the amount that we would be receiving.
All right, thank you. I would ask, do we have a consensus to go ahead and have the money kept in Glendale?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
That was easy.
That was great, wasn't it?
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Council.
you.
Ms. Burr, item 4, if you would.
Council item of special interest on code enforcement deployment.
And once again, Deputy City Manager Rick St. John.
Mayor, members of the council, on February 14th, Councilmember Aldama initiated a council item of special interest looking at how we're deploying code within our city, specifically how we're aligning the grids and determining how many inspectors go into each area. It is work that we believe a staff needs to be done, and we can accomplish that with relatively light lift from IT and org performance. So I'm here today to seek council consensus to keep this council item of special interest moving forward, so that we can do that work and come back and report to council on what we find.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. St. John, thank you for bringing the item of interest back, and thank you for your staff meeting with me. Can you be a little more clear so that the council understands? My request is what you have laid out here and what you spoke about, but it was also how do we increase the service levels in the Ocotillo district, because we find that there's a significant amount of code that needs to be addressed that's not being reported. So it's not that it's not there, it's just not being reported. And for whatever reason, we have a responsibility to take a look at ourselves and say we need to address that and target that and give it resources that we normally don't. Can you talk about that and what we talked about in our meeting?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, yes, certainly. So the way we're currently aligning grids is looking at proactive calls as well as the calls received from the community. And we know that in certain areas, the Ocotillo District, for example, they're underreporting the issues that are occurring within their community. And so the numbers that we're getting are somewhat skewed. And so we need to take a better look at rates of violations in particular neighborhoods or on streets and compare that to the amount of work that is currently being done and what may need to be done to better control that blight. And so there are several different metrics that I think that we can pull in to try to realign our grids in a way that makes better sense, that puts those resources back into the Ocotillo District, areas of the Cactus District, Yucca, Barrel, all the way up through into Cholla, to better align so that we're taking into account exactly what the council member just said, and that is that there are areas of our town that are underreporting, and we see that across the board when it comes to enforcement. So we know, for example, that there's an underreporting that's occurring when it comes to crime within certain areas of our city. And so the police department takes that into account when they're developing and forming their beats. We simply need to do the same thing on the code side of the house, better align our resources to where the needs actually exist, and put those resources in there on a full-time basis to help long-term control that blight.
Mayor. Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor. Precisely, and thank you so much for detailing and outlining that. I want the council to know, and those, our viewers, that my pulse is on the district, and I'm the representative for the district, so my pulse is on the code enforcement that's needed and the lack of reporting, and that's what my item of interest was. But during our meeting, I want the council to understand that we realize that's citywide. That could be over in the Cholla district if we continue to work on the methodology that we've had for many years. It's been working. And I think we're missing a bit, and that's what we talked about. So this could happen in the Yucca district, this could happen in the Cactus district. I just so happen to know that immediately we need those additional services. And I'd like to ask council for their consensus to have you continue. Thank you.
Yep.
It appears that there is a consensus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Bauer, item 5.
Downtown Campus Reinvestment Project Update.
Mayor, members of the council, I'll provide you a brief report on the update for our DCRP. I'll start first with the continuity of operations plan. A question did come in early this week in terms of where our departments are going. And so just to kind of let you know, within our 7 buildings, here's how we're going to be distributing our staff during the project. At the Sign building, we'll have our city attorney's office and our code compliance. The media center will be the city manager's office and our city council. The adult center will house engineering, human resources, and finance. Gripstick will be our building inspectors. At the airport, we'll have our right-of-way inspectors. The Beebe Museum will be development services, and the annex will be our one-stop shop and community services. In terms of where we're at on the continuity of operations plan right now, we have 7 projects underway. All the planning and design has been completed, and we have 3 projects that are totally complete, as indicated here. That's the Sign building, the Gripstick, and the airport. We have construction underway in the other 3 of the other 4. The only one that hasn't started is Media Center, and within the Media Center, we've ordered the necessary equipment, which we expect to be arriving later this spring, and we're still looking for a furniture install around the June timeframe. The adult center is substantially complete. It's about 80%. Right now, we're expecting the furniture install to begin in the first week of April, and sometime the engineering will be the first department to move in, and we think that'll happen sometime in early May. The Beebe Museum is underway, and you'll notice that again, we're currently on schedule and on budget and on scope. Our construction fencing has gone up, and as you can see by the picture here, the demolition has already begun for that facility. Same for the annex. It's within that Civic Center fenced off area, and we have minor areas that we'll be demoing later this month. It's a little bit a lighter touch by our team. Community engagement. We had our first series of meetings regarding the schematic approach for the main building itself. As you can see here by some of the pictures, we had 3 different locations. We had a meeting here in the council chambers. We had a meeting at Heroes Library, and we had a meeting at Gripstick. And additionally, it was recorded live, and it was streamed live and recorded as well. We had roughly about 35 people attended the 3 meetings, and our design team felt they had excellent feedback. Our next open house is coming up later this week, the 29th, and again, they'll be at the same 3 locations, Heroes Park, Library, the council chambers here, and of course, FRAC. Now, the purpose of the next meeting is really around the park itself. So we anticipate perhaps more input from the public. That's certainly Murphy Park has been one of the elements of the project that has received a tremendous amount of attention. And again, we'll have the same kind of format there. And then our goal will be is to take the feedback from both of these community engagements. We'll be having a workshop with the council on April 11th, and we'll put all that feedback together, and that'll be part of our presentation happening there. And so that's currently where we're at with that. I'll be glad to answer any questions the council may have.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thank you for meeting with me, you and your staff, Mr. Phelps. When I took my initial look at the layout for level 2 of the media center where the council and the mayor and the council's offices will be, kind of just raises some questions now. I see that the council and our assistants are in cubicles. If the conference room, and this could happen multiple times, is busy and occupied, where, and just on a daily basis, where are the council members and their staff, or with any staff, hold our meetings that should be confidential? Well, Councilmember Hugh will be sitting across from me, and as will the vice mayor, and she may be having a confidential conversation with her assistant or another employee or the city attorney, and I'm sitting right next door. So can you explain how that's going to help us in those meetings?
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Aldama. So a couple of thoughts on that. First, between the 2nd and 3rd floor at Media Center, we'll have 3 conference rooms. I've already had a conversation with the mayor's office, so we'll have 2 on that floor, and if really either will be available for use for private conversations. In the case of the mayor, if he had a scheduled meeting, we would let people know, but otherwise, the 2 conference rooms there, and then we'll work with our staff on the 3rd floor. We have another conference room there, and we'd be glad to work around, the council schedule. On Tuesdays, we're still trying to identify space on Tuesdays because we'll be at Civic Center for our meetings. And as you know, typically we have a gap between our workshops and sometimes our business meeting. We're also trying to identify space that's there. We recognize that that there's going to be some inconvenience. It's something we've had to communicate really to all of our employees that it's, the next 2 years is going to be, less than optimal in terms of how we operate. But we'll work real hard to meet the needs of the council and to meet the needs, of our staff as we move forward. And I'm confident that we can make sure that you have the type of space needed to conduct the business that you need to conduct.
Mayor, if I may. So it's good to know that I can't really read this, but there's a conference room that's dedicated to the mayor's office that if it's not being used, which I can imagine it's being used all day, every day, I'm sure it's got a heavy schedule, that it can be used by the council because hours could be booked by others. And so that's good to know. However, and I could be just totally wrong here, the council may be okay with it, but there still isn't any level of confidentiality within the cubicles. Can you tell me, is 2nd level, it says arena management, is that just an error? Is that where they are, or is that where the city managers and your staff are going to be?
Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Aldama, again, the 3rd floor will be the city manager's office, and government. ASM will have moved out, as will CVB will have moved out of that space, and there's a conference room on that floor, and that one will be available for use by the council as well. One thing that we've done on the equipment that we've ordered for the furniture for the 2nd floor is the staff has extended the walls and the privacy elements to it to provide more of a confidential environment to work from. Again, we have people that are in fixed offices today throughout the staff that work full-time Monday through Friday that are unfortunately having to go into cubicles. We just didn't have a tremendous amount of options, and the cost to and the time delay to have built in permanent fixed offices at the media center would have been quite extensive. And so we're again, as I said, we're trying to make the best compromises we can, and we'll work real hard to accommodate the needs of the council as we get into it. I'm sure we'll make adjustments along the way.
Yeah, I'm not going to harp too much longer, but I think there should have been more consideration on how we conduct business in there. And then your staff has quite a bit of offices that were considered for you and your staff. So I'm not sure if it's a lack of consideration or just not enough input from the council. I mean, this is the first I've seen of it the day you and I met, and I do appreciate you allowing me to give my input. But I'll leave it at that. I just don't know how we function there, but sounds like you have a plan for it.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Mayor, I'm sorry if I may. Yeah, I thought you said maybe for a short period. So this is temporary, but it's most likely 2 years, isn't it? That will be in here.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember O'Donnell, I haven't seen the exact construction table, but I think 2 years would be approximately a good range.
Yeah, and again, just the consideration and asking the council their input on how they would like their area to be over a 2-year period. That's a long time. That's semi-permanent. But maybe you and I can have a conversation offline. Thank you.
All right. You need anything on this from us?
No.
Okay. Next.
City manager report? I'm used to being called into.
Well, no, I didn't know if you were going to go to the adult center or.
No, I'm completed on my report.
Okay. All right. Very good. Wasn't sure if you were going to go through them one by one.
We did.
Okay. If I can get my papers unstuck here. There we go. Next item is exactly what you just said. Mr. Phelps, anything for the city manager's report?
Two quick items. Again, on the heels of the Super Bowl, we're of course now well underway with our planning for the Final Four, which will be here in Glendale next year. And on Friday, we have representatives of our team will be flying to Phoenix as in participation with the Houston Host Committee to begin looking at how they have gone about planning for this year's event. And so we have officials from our public safety and our building safety leads will be back there, and they'll be embedded with the kind of counterparts with the city of Houston to kind of learn and side by side what they're doing. And so that'll take place this coming weekend. We'll turn around and do the same thing for the next year after us. We'll expect a visiting delegation to come in, and we'll kind of take them under our arms and work with them as well. Also, just want to call out one of our employees who we just received an award, Nicole Munson, who just received the Arizona Emergency Manager of the Year Award from the Arizona Association of Emergency Managers. And primarily, it was for her outstanding work in helping to organize and coordinate the incredible effort built around the Super Bowl. This association is a community of professionals that are comprised of firefighters, emergency management professionals, law enforcement, safety officials, homeland security, emergency medical services, business leaders, not-for-profits. They all make up this organization, and they chose to acknowledge Nicole and her fine work. Obviously, it was a huge team effort to pull off the Super Bowl, but I think it's outstanding for her, and want to send our congratulations to Nicole for helping to lead this down the right path. Thank you, sir.
City Attorney's report.
No report, though we do have an executive session today.
Okay. Council items of special interest. Mr. Aldama.
Mayor, I have none, but I have a comment since we are vacated for this evening, if I may. Congratulations to Nicole. Last night I had the privilege and honor to attend the police awards ceremony. There hadn't been one for several years because of COVID. And I want to thank all of our chief and our police officers, our commanders, and everyone, civilian and non-civilian, for the work you do. And congratulations to all the award recipients for their heroism. And they're just an incredible team of police officers and unsworn employees who make it happen in Glendale, make it safe. So I want to thank our chief and our police officers. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Hugh.
Nothing, Mayor.
Councilmember Melner.
Nothing additional, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay, and I have nothing. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? We have an executive session. Council meeting is recessed.